A very warm welcome to our ChatterStars webinar that we are running in collaboration with the lovely people from Pobble, because they have all sorts to say about the use of image to improve literacy skill and improve vocabulary. So we're like to say a very warm welcome to them, and Simon, who is from Pobble, will be presenting for the sort of second half of this webinar. So why image? Well, we're going to be looking at how image can really develop that confident, insightful talk that we know is what is so crucial and underpins everything we are and enable in the classroom, but also in families. And that sort of conversational talk that really underpins all of our experience around literature and being able to write successfully and being able to express ourselves successfully. And that link with life chances and a broad vocabulary is really, really strong. So looking at different ways that we can use different tools, part of our toolkits, to boost vocabulary is a really, really useful endeavour. So I hope by the end of this session you will have found a few ideas to take with you. There's a lovely metaphorical link between the use of image and colour and vocabulary. And as Voltaire said many, many moons ago, writing is the painting of the voice. And certainly for me as an English teacher, I have made the analogy very frequently that an artist has a palette of colour and a writer has a palette of words. And choosing the right colour is just as vital as choosing the right word, because we allow that choice of colour to really add depth and meaning to the images that we see, or to add depth and meaning to the words that we read and the message we're trying to convey. It's about eloquence, it's about that verbal charm and being able to create a picture with words. So there's a real intrinsic link between image and vocabulary that I think is a really interesting one to explore with your children at home or in the classroom, and to pull out the kind of synergies between that palette of colour and that palette of vocabulary, and thinking about the choices we make in the same way as we might think about the choices we make with colour. So image is a really strong part of our toolkit when we're looking at boosting vocabulary and energising that sort of verbal environment. The other point I want to make here as well is that as teachers and as families, for our young people, we really are the givers of hope. We enable our young people to be successful when they go forward and when they leave home or when they leave school and they go on to those next steps and those next parts of life. We are the givers of hope for them by equipping them with that powerful vocabulary that they can use to improve life chances, express their hopes and dreams and imaginations. And of course, that translates through into written outcomes. And if they can say it, they can write it. So that really important link between what they can say and what they can write will stand them in really good stead for every assessment point, but more importantly, for life beyond. This is a slightly contested piece of information that was researched in the 70s by a chap called Edgar Dale. And there's all sorts of deliberation really about whether this is accurate or not. However, what is true is that there are layers of ideas behind how we transmit and communicate ideas and try and encourage learning for our young people. And it is certainly true that what we see and what we hear and discuss, so that's sort of 30, 50, 70% of what's retained, is where that real important learning can happen. So image sits really comfortably within that middle ground of being a catalyst for talk, of being a trigger to inspire conversation, to inspire imagination, to inspire that levels and layers of meaning and all of the different things that we are and that we bring to an image. Because of course, when we're looking at an image, we bring something of ourselves, we bring all of our prior experience and learning to that point where we're studying a picture or a moving image or whatever it might be. So interesting graphic, but slightly contested. But I think that there's mileage to think that actually there's a real benefit to being able to see an image whilst we talk, whilst we discuss and listen. And we all know that quote. We all know that quote, and it's oh so true. One picture, 1,000 words. And the opposite is true too. You know, 1,000 words can create a picture. So it's really a sort of a seesaw of a link between image and vocabulary and text. And the vocabulary that pictures like the screen can generate is really has real depth and is something that we can really explore and get underneath, both to do with colour and certainly having been a GCSE examiner, the use of colour is a really useful quick win actually for lots of GCSE students if they're able to talk about colours that are a bit more alternative, you know, like a rust coloured sky or an amber glow, then that's more interesting than talking about red and orange. So colours and that whole network and palette of colour is a really good idea to explore with your young people and build up their understanding of different colours. So we've really got two ways that we can use image really productively. There's probably about 400 others, but I want to look at two in particular. And the two I want to look at is the way we use image to inspire creativity and inspire ideas. So that would be the middle idea there, that image, that photograph of hands knotted together to create the image of a brain. And that can inspire talk, and that can inspire and build vocabulary while we unpick the meaning behind the image. The other way we can use image to help us with vocabulary is to use image itself to capture and define keywords. And that works really well. On the left there you can see that science lesson where cause and effect is very clearly supported by the images used to create the writing. Equally with the peacock, this is a lovely, lovely activity and a really great idea to do at home or in the classroom is to whiz out to your local DIY store and get some of those colour chart cards and look at the names of the colours, because the names of the colours are so imaginative and some of them make you properly giggle and some of them you think, oh, it's a beautiful name for that colour. But how brilliant is that display there where the teacher has created a palette of colour around a peacock and fanned it out to look like the peacock's feathers. And in so doing, it becomes memorable and it becomes really embedded within young people's eye line and within their own language store, because it's so visual and there's a really intrinsic link. We know from some of the Dr. Jessie Ricketts research that link between seeing a word and seeing it in a interesting way and retaining it. That link is really, really strong. It's much more likely to embed if we're using image in a really imaginative way. Okay, there's people waiting in the lobby. I'm hoping that they can come straight in. So have a look at that idea between using image like the middle one to inspire and then also using image to capture and define and make language really, really memorable, because that's what we're trying to do is boost a powerful voice for our young people. This will be very familiar to you, I expect, if you are in the classroom quite regularly. This is something that more and more of us are using. If you are a parent, this might not be so familiar, but it's a really useful and very straightforward model to help students understand either a new academic term, we call that Tier 3 language, or to unpick more complex vocabulary choice in fiction, for example. And you can see there that that's the general model. You have your keystone word in the middle, and then you define what it is, you give the characteristics, and then you give examples and non-examples. And there's one done for you there on reptiles, which is quite useful, obviously a science lesson, but all sorts of ideas there. The reason I mention it is because actually with the Freya model, we can use image within that to help us understand in a more visual way what the examples and non-examples or the characteristics might be for our keystone word. So here's an example from a social studies lesson. And we've got all the definition of the facts there, but then for the examples, we've got some images that help really bring to life what is meant by boycott. You've got a protest march going on, and then non-examples, that's really clear. And just like we heard from Einstein, that does tell us 1,000 words just through that use of image on the Freya model. And here's a couple of others. So your keystone word here is star. Thought that would be a good one to choose. And you've got your definitions and characteristics, and then the examples and the non-examples are purely visual. And that does help to unpick the understanding and the meaning behind it. So I thought that would be a useful one to share so that we can understand how image can help us in a more immediate visual way. But then the Freya model can also be used to inspire talk. So if you had to explain what a star was, to use that Freya model as your catalyst for talk for the discussion is really helpful, because you haven't got the words, you have to find the words, you've just got the images, so you have to get underneath the images to find the vocabulary, and that in itself is a very useful task for the classroom particularly, but that might be something you can have fun with at home as well. And then there's another example there with the word pliable. So I hope that's useful to think about that use of the Freya model, but with using image. I've also had a look at some word gradients, or clines they're sometimes called, because I actually think that this is a version of art. You know, word art in particular is a really powerful medium, isn't it, to show and express emotion and hopes and dreams and all the things that we want to embody within art. So word art we can actually create through these word gradients. And if you haven't come across word gradients, they're a fabulous way of looking at the layers of meaning between two polar opposite words. So the examples we've got here are slow and fast, and softly spoken and loud. And what does it mean to move from being slow to being fast in terms of that vocabulary? So sort of midway point, we've got walk, moving up through to running and sprinting, down to limping and crawling on the other end of slow. And we can turn that into an image. That would make a really lovely display. Lots of Post-it notes could be used on your walls at home, and you could debate, you know, what does it look like if I put meander slightly above stroll. So it's an interesting way of using image, but as a word art image, because you can use those gradients in all sorts of ways. It might be a ladder, it might be a train track, it might be an arrow, however you wanted to do it. So there's another idea for using image to boost vocabulary. If you joined us for our Ways with Poetry, you'll recognise a few of these. We've got a couple of calligrams here, which is where you create an image using the vocabulary associated with that image. So we've got an umbrella, or where you have a word like shark that you turn into the actual beast that it is. That works very well for nouns, but you can also use it for other word classes. And then you've got the ones in the middle where you actually create the image of what the word is describing. There it's actually dripping, the word dripping. It's actually furry, the word furry. And you could have lots of fun with display with this, with big bags of textiles. That would create really interesting pieces of art. And it might well be that there are key words that you can do with this that then immediately are much more familiar and embed easily because you've got that link with image. And then, of course, the whole idea about display, you can see that little one there with Narnia. Just getting words into the eye line of our children through image is a really, really successful way of embedding vocabulary to help them move on and make progress. Okay, so here we're moving on now to looking at moving image, and if you are in the profession, you will know and love Literacy Shed, I'm sure. If you are parents or families watching this, then have a look at what Literacy Shed have to offer. They've got all sorts of brilliant animations, many of which are silent. And I've picked out some clips here that use silent animation. There might well be sound effect, and certainly in the piano there's a lot of music. In fact, in all of them there's quite a lot of music, but there's no talk, there's no speech. And so using some of these clips is a really successful and interesting way to enable words to come to life, because the architecture is there. It gives you the journey. The premise and the storyline is there for you. All you have to concentrate on is picking out the best colour of vocabulary you can possibly find and doing your own, you know, brilliant voiceovers. We all know the voiceover man kind of voice from the cinema. So you can create your own. You can do all sorts of activities around silent animation clips to boost and layer the best kind of vocabulary, and then actually record it and play it so that it feels like something that our children have created themselves. It's a really lovely activity to do, and once it's recorded, or if young people are brave enough and want to read it aloud and do it as it's playing, you can give a live presentation, and it does give a real clear structure for talk. So do have a look at some ideas for that. And sort of a natural progression of that is the TikTok idea. Because it's so finite, they're very, very short, 15 to 60 seconds long. I think there's real potential in TikTok for creating useful, interesting little clips where vocabulary is the focus. So again, this is about moving image, but you can layer on all sorts of features like slow-mo and filters and different graphics. But to create your own little finite piece of text that is a moving image really makes you think about your word choice, makes you think about the vocabulary you want to choose. And as a sort of a fun activity to do, it's a great place to go. And of course, you don't have to use the actual platform TikTok. You can just create your own, you know, give it a tic-tac kind of a name and create your own little versions of it that that young people can then create and share, choosing that best version of vocabulary they possibly can. And finally, for me, before I hand over to Simon, is just to remind you about the wonders of Pinterest. Pinterest is entirely built on the visual discovery tool, and the boards are just filled with all sorts of interesting images and ideas to help with vocabulary. I've actually built a board just around vocabulary. There's about 200 pins on there, and that's my address there, which is free to just go in and have a look. So do check it out and have a look at that one. That's my picture there, and apparently, apart from that being a nice picture of my daughter and I, if you scan that with your phone, it will just take you straight to the Pinterest board, where you'll find all sorts of boards and images around vocabulary. So I hope that's all helpful. I'm going to stop sharing and then invite Simon from Pobble to come and share what he does with you from his work at Pobble. Simon, lovely to see you and meet you and have you join us, and over to you.
Thanks, Helen. Yeah, and thank you for your presentation as well. Always fascinating to hear other people speak, and some yeah, as a primary school teacher and leader for many years, some brilliant ideas. So I will share my screen. Helen, please do let me know that works. Bear with me a moment. Let me know if you can see my screen. Perfect. Yep. Okay, so I'm not going to take a huge amount of your time, everybody. And again, I appreciate some of you will be watching a recording of this. You won't be watching this live. But for those of you that haven't heard of Pobble before, I'm one of the Pobble founders, primary school teacher and leader for many years. And one of the things I'm really passionate about as a platform, but also as a daddy and as a teacher, is trying to inspire children to write. And one of the ways prior to even creating Pobble, I used to do this with my children, was by using images. And of course, one of the reasons that I would use images is because it was a great way to get children talking, sort of repeating many of the things that Helen's just mentioned. And in turn, as well as talking, it led to children starting to really think about the vocabulary that they were using. So what I thought I would try to do in my session is just to share just a few of the ways that I would use images, both in my classroom, as a daddy, but also in my role as Pobble now. So I've got on the screen an image, and I'll talk to you a little bit in a moment about Pobble 365, where you can access lots of brilliant images like this. And for many years as a teacher, I would share an image with the children, and I would get them to talk about it. And of course, the children would talk about it. They would generate some words, and that was often a really good starting point. The second school that I was in, we had lots of children with English as a second language. So again, they were learning new vocabulary. But in terms of the writing, what I would then try to do with the images would be to then introduce tasks to try to help the children then put some of that vocabulary, some of that language into their written work. And one of the nicest activities I would always do with an image will be things around show me, don't tell me. So if you're not familiar with that, it was really the idea of trying to describe what a feeling looked like. So in this particular image, I talked to the children about imagining that they were there. How would they feel? And of course, when it was just the image, the children would say things like, I'd be scared, I'd be frightened, you know, scared, petrified. They can list all of those words off, can't they? But of course, with show me, don't tell me, the idea was they had to start to describe what that feeling looked like. Now, sometimes before even sharing the image with them, I would get them to talk about a time that they were scared and how did it make them feel. And I would get the children to talk to each other about that. And again, thinking about vocabulary, you would get the children that would say, I start to feel hot, or my arms had goosebumps on them. And we'd start to build up a list of vocabulary around what scared looks like. And then, of course, building on from that, the children could then start to put some of that vocabulary into their work. You know, goosebumps covered his skin as the intimidating giant towered over him. So again, the idea being that we start from an image, we generate that vocabulary, we try to link it to something they're familiar with. So again, they were thinking about when they were scared, that then linked really nicely into them putting some sentences together. And I've not got an image for this one, but one of the really nice activities we would always do at the beginning of the year, and I would do this with all of the classes that I worked with, is we will pick some key feelings words, you know, sad, happy, frightened, scared. And around those words, we would start to describe what those words look like. And again, whenever we were doing a piece of writing, if one of the children put in there to their work, I was happy, we would look at these big A1 sheets and say, can you remember when we talked about the word happy? What did we say happy looked like? You know, a big smile on her face, bounced along the pavement. So again, really nice activity, all about generating vocabulary, but most importantly, then linking that back into their writing as well. Now, as well as obviously sharing images that children could, I guess, associate with, you know, they've seen a giant perhaps in a storybook that they've read. One of the things I would often do is use images where nobody had seen them before. In a way, they were a bit wacky, a bit quirky. And what was really nice about them is that often children would look at them with a bit more awe. You know, what on earth is going on? Actually, if I really start to delve, to begin with, I focus on the fact that there's maybe an island, and then I see the sea, and then I maybe see the boat, And if I asked the children to talk about this picture, they're the types of things that they would say. But if we start to go a little bit further, actually what I start to notice is there's actually a beach. And on the beach, it looks like there might be some shells. And if I really delve, actually, this is a giant shell that's been turned upside down. And you can imagine then the conversation that starts to flow. Now, in terms of getting that conversation to flow, that's quite difficult at times because there will always be children that just focus on what they can see. Now, I believe this is a Pi Corbett activity. I certainly used the Pi Corbett Jumpstart for Grammar book in many occasions in my classroom. And one of the things I used to love about the images was instead of just getting the children to write down what they could see, we would start to then say, what do you think's happening? What do you wonder? So again, with the particular image that's there, instead of the children just putting, I see a sea, I see an island, they start to have to go, I think, and I wonder. And when you add the I wonder statement in at the end, that's when they start to ask questions. You know, I wonder why the giant shell's been turned. I wonder why the shell is full of water. I wonder how it happened. So again, they start to get a little bit more inquisitive. And again, what's really nice about that is they start to think about the vocabulary that they're using. They're using in different questioning words rather than perhaps what happens if you just share an image with them. They just focus on the what can I see? Now, because I used to love images, one of the things I was very passionate about at Pobble was actually making it really easy for teachers like yourselves, for parents, to go and find interesting, quirky images as well. So what we've done on the Pobble website is we found 365 really interesting, again, some of them quite wacky at times, hopefully things that children haven't seen before. And alongside those images, we have a range of activities. And if you check out our website, Pobble365 or pobble.com, you will see all of those are available, absolutely free to access and use. So if you're looking for an image to just get children talking, if you're looking for an image and you want the children to generate 10 words to describe it, this particular image in the top left hand corner is one of my favorites. You can probably see the dragon, the fire, the little boy. Again, imagine getting the children to come up with 10 words to describe that image and then talking about it with their partner. And just to share a few more practical ideas in terms of Pobble 365, one of the things we also have on the Pobble site is a blog. And on the blog, we get teachers to share ideas about how they use images in their classroom. And one of the particular blog posts on there, perhaps I'll get a link and share it all with you. One of the particular blog posts on there is from an EYFS teacher in Sheffield, Charlotte Smythe. And they use Pobble 365 every single week. And you can see on the screen here the images in each of these areas. Now, one of the really nice things, I went to visit this school, is they really use the images for developing talk. They then move on to generate vocabulary. From there, of course, and Helen said it earlier, only when they can say it, talk, generate the vocabulary, does the writing begin to flow. And you can see there's a couple of really nice things that they do. This particular teacher has an image in a frame each week. You can see here they use the I can see, I wonder, I think. They've got key vocabulary words around it, perhaps to help the children talk about the image. They've even got some little artifacts there to really bring that image to life. One of the other teachers that I chatted with, they call it the conversation station, which is perhaps one of the nicest phrases I've ever seen used in a classroom. And again, this particular school has 90% of the children with English as a second language. So, you know, generating vocabulary talk is really, really important. So in this particular classroom, the children sit in pairs. And again, they might do it for 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. But the only thing that they're allowed to talk about in their conversation is the image. And they have some little questions to help them, to prompt them. They sometimes have some vocabulary as well. And of course, as they move through school, you know, moving into year 1 and into year 2, they start to use these images to generate little sentences. They start to, you can see this particular image here, they've annotated around it, they've started to build some sentences based around, in that particular school, actually talking about the image as part of their homework. So again, I'm a huge fan of images. There's a million different ways that you can use them to generate vocabulary. And at a time, certainly here at Pobble, where we know that writing has perhaps been, quite badly hit during COVID, it's maybe the subject that children found really difficult to do at home. Maybe the support from parents with their writing was quite a challenge. Actually, the really good starting point of just trying to get the children to perhaps write every day is maybe giving them that nice, exciting image to look at, to talk about, to build up sentences from. And then finally, to finish, everyone, if you are interested in some of the things that I've mentioned today, we're a huge community of teachers, children, parents. Do give us a follow. We're on Instagram and Twitter. Do check out the site. As mentioned, you can sign up for a free account to access those Pobble 365 images, and do search for our Pobble blog as well. And Helen, I will share that blog link with you so that you can perhaps send that as a follow-up link after the webinar as well. But yeah, Helen, I hope that was helpful. And brilliant. Thanks everyone for choosing to join my session today.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Simon. We're just delighted to be partnered with Pobble. Definitely believe we're stronger together, and together, I think we can make a real difference. So thank you ever so much, everybody, for coming along. And if you've been watching this on Catch Up or on our YouTube, then thank you. Do check out what we're up to at ChatterStars. We've got new puzzles coming all the time, and in the autumn term, we've got some exciting news about etymology coming along. So follow us as well on Twitter and on Facebook, see what we're up to. But thank you ever so much for giving us your time, and that's it. Thanks. Thank you, Simon.
Thanks, everyone.